Welcome back. I'm Hollis Turnbow, bringing you and taking you on that next step in the quilting process toward the final goal of quilt as desired. On your table here, I have actually two examples. I'd like to be able to move around and flop these things around, but the camera won't let me do that. So I want you to hook in your imagination, turn your imagination on, and walk through with me this process. One consideration you need to make is what kind of batting are you going to use in the quilt. And that depends a lot on how you're going to quilt it. Are you going to hand quilt it, or are you going to machine quilt it? Are you going to machine quilt it yourself, or are you going to send it out for someone to machine quilt? So that's the first consideration. If you're going to hand quilt, then you need something that is light and soft and pliable so that you can needle through easily. If you're going to a shop to buy batting, and you'll see it on the roll, take a needle along with you and stitch through so that you see how well it does needle, because some are very difficult to hand quilt while others are more easy. On the red quilt, which I showed you earlier, Oriental fabrics, rather elegant looking, and I felt that the only thing this particular needed was some of the new bamboo batting that we find on the market today. Very soft, very pliable. I think it will give a very elegant look, and I'm told, although I haven't tried this yet, that it's very easy to both hand quilt and machine quilt. So this is what I'll be using. That's probably a little extra touch that I'll put on the red quilt because it is Oriental. But let's go back to these that are on the table. The first example on the top is just simply a piece of drapery fabric that I found that I liked very much. Thought it would make a nice lap robe, even a quilt for a small bed. And I pin basted this. And when you're pin basting, then you need to stretch out all three layers on a table of some kind. I read on the internet a lot of questions that quilters are asking, especially the beginning quilters, saying, I have no place that I can stretch out my quilt to baste. And then the answers will come back. Go to your local library or your church and put all the tables together. Then you'll have enough surface that you can stretch out the entire quilt. In the old days, what quilters did is they would actually put the quilt in their frame and stretch it as they basted it. That gave all the layers very flat, and they would baste it probably by hand with a long basting stitch, needle and thread. If you should do that, there's one caution that I might make, is be sure and use white or natural thread, because if you baste your quilt in a color thread and you're in a very high humid climate, then there's a possibility that the thread could fade onto your quilt before you get it quilted. So long stitches in white or natural thread is the best for that. And you would start usually in the middle. If you have it all stretched out, just start in the middle and work out to the edge. That's because you could always stretch out and smooth out any wrinkles that you have in the three layers. Very difficult to smooth those out if you're pushing your quilt in the three layers in. I call that unintentional embellishments, if that happens, or otherwise pleats on the back. So you want to keep all three layers as flat and straight as you can. Now, I've quilted king-size quilts on a card table, and I want you now to kick in your imagination and listen carefully and go along with me. Let's assume that I have this quilt and I need to baste it. I certainly can't put it out fully on the table, because my table isn't large enough and I have no place in my house to do it or even put it on the floor. So what I would do is I'd put all three layers and center them on the tabletop as I have this centered here. Stretch the bottom, tape it down so there's no wrinkles in it, put the batting on it, smooth that down, might even put some tape to keep it stretched, and then the top, and do the same thing. So all your layers are very smooth. Now, imagine this on a card table. What you have is you have a lot of bulk and a lot of weight hanging from either side. That helps to stretch the quilt. So when you get it all layered down like that and stretched out, then you start putting your pins in or baste it by hand. Put the pins in. When you get it completely covered, the card table top, then start closing them. The reason for that is if you pin baste a quilt and you close it at that point, there's a tendency for these layers to wrinkle up. So leave them open. Try not to stick your hand with it until you get it done. And then hopefully you found one of these little gadgets called a quick clip, which really saves your fingernails. And what you do there is you reach down, you just simply grab the open thing and clip it closed. Very easy to do. One time I was basting a queen size quilt and I couldn't find my quick clip, and man, my fingers were really sore when I finished. So something like this. Some people will use a grapefruit spoon, the spoon that has a little nudge down there, anything to help you close these pins. Then when you get the surface, or the amount that's on the surface of your card table, just go down to the edge, grab it like this, just grab it and pull it to the next unpinned section. All that pulling tends to stretch it out, and that's what you want to do. Reposition it until that section is pinned. Then come to the side and do the same thing, this side, and then back this way. The camera won't let me do that here, but use your imagination. That pulling operation tends to keep all the layers stretched, so you truly can baste a queen or king size quilt on a card table. It takes just a little bit of work to do it. Another method of basting, which is becoming very popular, is spray basting. And I have underneath here another quilt. It's one of my Civil War quilts that I want now to spray baste and show you what the process is. I have already gone through on this and straightened out all three of the layers so that everything is nice and smooth in there. So it's nice and smooth. Then I will pull this up until I have half of the quilt on the table surface. And then smooth these layers out so everything is going to be flat. Using the spray, you can reposition it because it's not permanent. So if you do make a mistake or make a bubble in it, then you can get it all straight and smooth. Now that's what I've done here. Straightened everything out so everything is tight. Sometimes I will either tape all of these layers down so I know that they're straight. Other times I don't. It just simply depends on how much confidence I have in this whole smoothing process. So I have half now of the quilt onto the table surface, and all of this is smooth. Now, what I will do is take the first layer, pull it up to the top. It sure helps if you have a friend who can come in and help you do this, but I don't have a friend today. So, and I have done this myself at home, so it's something that I'm familiar with doing. So I stretch all of those up. Make sure that all of this is very smooth and would be tighter if this table surface would hold masking tape, which it doesn't. Now, I want to walk over to the table here and get my basting spray. There are several brands on the market, and it becomes a personal preference to quilters. Reading the internet, someone said, I've always had good luck with such and such a brand. So sometimes you may have to try. Now, I will say this. It is certainly better if you're in a well-ventilated place using this, because it does have an accelerant inside it and does get a little bit toxic smelling for you. So if you have a well-ventilated place, they work fine. Sometimes I put a small fan nearby, and that helps to dissipate that. But I don't have that here, but do that caution. Read the label, read what it says, and follow those directions. Okay, I have the backing, I have my backing down flat, so I take the spray, really shake it. There's always instructions about shaking it, you know, shake it to the music, you know, put music on. And then go down and give it a very even spray. And you will learn exactly how much you need to do to give the kind of adhesion that you need here. Then once you have completely covered, then reach over and pull your top, your batting down. Smooth it out, and you can feel it sticking there. Keep working it. If you have a bobble in it, then you can pull it apart. See how easily it comes apart? So keep working this until you have no wrinkles in your batting at all. Okay. The question has always been asked, how long does this last if you can't get to the quilting immediately? And it lasts a long time. In fact, the pink quilt on the other table there, I basted it well over a year ago, and it's still very well attacked. So this is all nice and smooth. I don't feel any wrinkles down into the bottom here. Here's a little bit of a wrinkle right here. Okay, go back. Now, after you finish that, then the next thing is to spray the top of the batting. And I will do the same thing. Now at home, what I would do is I would probably cut strips of newspaper, put down on the side to make sure that I don't get any of the adhesive onto the table or whatever the surface I'm working. So use whatever caution you need in order to place it in such a way that will be easy for you. So I'll go down. You don't really need to put too much on it until you feel that it's completely covered. Then pull the next layer down, and again start in the middle, smooth it down. So it's very smooth, lay it out. All of this is straight, because this is really going to get a lot of topsy-turvy work when it goes into the sewing machine, because this will be machine quilted. Okay. Now, I have the first half spray basted, and then the next thing is I would pull this so that the center comes to the table and do the same thing on the other side. Very easy, very convenient. Unless you're allergic to the spray, it's a fast, easy method of doing it. You've avoided the pins, and you can see the pink quilt here on the other table. That was a year more ago. I do find that sometimes you'll find a bit of wrinkles in the back, and all you need to do is to take that to an iron and iron it out, and that then takes all those wrinkles out, and the rest of them will come out in the quilting. So that's a very brief introduction to basting, because you've got to hook those layers together. One other thing I want to mention is there's always a question about your backing. With the price of fabric going up, we do everything now that we can to save money on that. Normally, what I would have to do, since this is wider than the 44 inches of your normal fabric, I would have to piece this, which means that I would have to buy at least 2 lengths of this fabric. There's a very interesting method that was developed by a quilter by the name of John Flynn out in Montana. And on his website, he has instructions for doing a backing in which you, rather than piece it on the horizontal, you piece it on the diagonal, like here. And there's a formula there, and I won't go into it, and you work through it to tell exactly how much fabric that you need to buy. In this particular case, I bought, working with the formula, I used one length plus 28 inches extra. The formula will tell you that, and then you cut the fabric on the diagonal and sew it back together, and then move one side down the other. And as you move it down, it stretches out to the width you need. Very easy to do it, very economical way, certainly today in the price of our fabric, unless you have a wide piece of goods that you can do it. Basting, a very essential process. It's a very personal process also, because each person has their own method that they want to use. One more step in the process. Now we have the quilt ready to do one of the most important things, and that's mark it. So stay with me, sharpen your pencil if you're taking notes. Come back later, I'll be here and we'll do a little bit of marking.